Well, I know on behalf of Andy, I want to thank everyone for being here. My name's Dan Kavanaugh, and I'm a friend of Andy's and Carmen's and Daniel's and many of you in this room. And I've had the privilege of kind of being with Andy as he's written his way through this saga that is this, All Gone Awry. And it's a kind of a crazy thought that when you end up with this, you know, how do we hold this and it becomes a book like this beautiful cover and I don't know, how many of you have actually had your hands on it and read it? Great. So those of you that haven't, the cover's attractive and it doesn't kind of lure you in, but what's between the covers is outstanding stuff. And I was thinking when Andy asked me if I would introduce him that have to create something, whether it's a painting, a sculpture, whether you have to write a piece, a composition, a musical piece, that it starts here in your head. And you talk yourself either into doing it or out of doing it. And then during the process, which is years and years in the making, you're constantly asking yourself questions like, why did I ever start? Where am I going to finish? Who's actually going to read this? I could have just told myself this story. And you know, when we go to a movie, when we go to a museum, or when we read a book, the thing is, we're reading it, we're holding it, but that person, the person who created that movie, did all those things, set up all the sets and the lighting. They didn't just do it for themselves. They really did it for the audience that gets to read it, see it, visualize it. And so I had a little bit of a chance to hang around Andy while he was doing this writing and talk. And this actually, for me, was this gigantic thing that I got to review and look at and ask questions and see what was going on in Andy's brain at the time that he was writing it, and it was quite remarkable. And even though his title is All Gone Awry, it was really, as it went along over the years, it was all come together. And it came together in such a brilliant and wonderful way. The characters and the tie-in of art and the anguish of artists, anybody creating with their creative gene, how they go back and forth between, this is what I'm going to do, and the other part, which is, this is what I want to do. This is what I need to do. And how do I get those two things to come together? Well, I would say, Andy, you did it in an absolutely brilliant way of bringing us together with some characters and with some familiar ground that we all know. The university, some of the spots we eat at, and some of the places we visit in Santa Cruz. So it's kind of a combination for me of things I know and a lot of things I didn't know that Andy helped introduce through his book. And the last thing I would like to say is that it's been a privilege to be able to read it, Andy, in advance. And I'm really happy to have this copy as well as this copy. Andy, come on up and
okay.
We're going to have
Please let me know if this is either too loud or too soft. But Dan, thank you so much for those kind words and everything like that. I mean, you know, you were doing so well. I could give you the next half hour, because you probably know this book about as well as I do. I've read it so many times. But truly, I really want to thank everybody in this room for coming to this event. It really means a lot to me. And so, you know, to my friends here, you know, this has taken a lot of time to write this book, but you've been very, as I said, supportive throughout this process. And so I could just sort of imagine how, you know, you might look at the social calendar and you'd see something like, well, here's the function and the Kumasakas are going to be there. And then you'd say something to yourself like, oh, well, Carmen will be there. It'll be fun. And then you'd say, well, what are we going to talk to Andy about? And you say, well, ask him about the book. And so he said, well, I asked him about the book last time, the time before, and then you get the response, well, for heaven's sake, ask him again. So really, to me, the two words that come up for me are gratitude and celebration, because you are the people who helped bring me through this process. This community is very special and very supportive. So if this is a point of arrival for me as an author, I think it's really a point of arrival for the greater community itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by thanking a bunch of people who helped me in this process, number one. And then I'm going to go ahead and read from the book. And then we'll have a little Q&A. And then I'll do a book signing for those people who are interested. And by the way, if you don't have a book and you want to get one, you can get one at discount today, just for being here. And not only that, you're going to get a lot of freebies here because there are bookmarks and stickers over here like this. Okay, so if you take a sticker, don't tell anybody that you heard this from me, but you can put that sticker on any building in Santa Cruz. And you know, it's really free advertisement for me because it has my website URL on it. So if you think about it, it's great for marketing purposes, you know, but not very good if you were into criminal behavior. You know, come and get me, this is my website. So I'm going to start by thanking a lot of people here who helped me through this long process. And then I'm going to go ahead and read from my book, and then we'll have a little Q&A, and then I'll go ahead and do some book signing for those interested. And we would open up the refreshments and open up doors and everything. We do have air purifiers here. Thank you for wearing your masks. So I'm going to thank some special people here today. And I'd like to start off with my family. But I think I've just been left. So, but I hope you hear this, Carmen. Well, I really want to thank Carmen because, well, she understands my need to compulsively write, and she also helped a lot in developing a certain character in this book. And I want to thank my sons, Daniel and Anthony, for helping me with certain aesthetic decisions about the way this book came out, and also their special expertise in technology. So Anthony and his wonderful girlfriend Emma put together my website, and they're doing the filming. They're doing the filming today. So if you hear your name, maybe you can just stretch out and wave your hand, okay? But first I do want to start off with people who provided these wonderful refreshments over there. And chief among them, Dana Warner. Kathy Cavanaugh. And Debbie Rollinson. And I think Dana wants to invite you onto this this thing that we can do together, which is that Dana is going to be able to provide for events like this and other events. So if you see something coming along, I mean, she's fantastic. She is really great. And if you have something coming up, please speak to her and arrange for something by all means. And I want to send out a special thank you to Melissa Walker because it was Melissa who suggested that we even have this event. Because as you know, two months ago, this was not a possibility. We didn't think we could ever do this. But here we are today, and Melissa, you even suggested this venue, which of course is a wonderful a community venue for all of us here. So anyway, other people that I would like to thank. I would like to thank 3 early readers who read this book at a time when it was 60,000 words longer. Yeah. Now you may wonder what 60,000 words longer is. It's like about 90 pages. And these 3 people got through the whole thing. And they were so kind that they gave me encouragement at a time that I had some really severe doubts. So those 3 people are Dan Kavanaugh, Lorton Heft, and Dean Walker. Okay, so I want to thank Jan Leininger. Go ahead. Jan put together our first writers group, and when was that? 1995?
So far back, I can't remember.
Yeah. This was after class with Robert Sword about creative writing, and you gathered a group of like-minded people, and we had a wonderful time. And we also had a really good time because, the wine and the beer flow freely. And it's amazing how much softer and kinder the critiques became over the course of the evening. So thank you so much. And then I want to thank Sandy Rainey. She's a wonderful writer in her own right, and whose critique I valued throughout the whole process. You went through a lot of the times when this whole thing was being revised over and over again. So thank you so much for your help there. And let's see, I want to thank Rick Kleffel. Is Rick here yet? Rick Kleffel. Oh, there you go, Rick. Okay, glad. I want everyone to meet you because you put together a fantastic, really good review of the book itself. And then you hosted me during a podcast that you hosted for Narrative Species. And you've been around for a long time, and you're a radio personality, I think, in the Monterey Bay area. And you were just so kind and helpful and helped me so much. Thank you, Rick. I want to thank Steve LaBerge, attorney Steve LaBerge. I really needed your legal expertise during parts of this book, and you provided it. Plus, you were just very kind and encouraged me to write. And are Dick and Phyllis Wasserstrom here?
At the last minute, they decided they can't risk it. They're just doing that.
Oh, okay. Well, I just wanted to say to them, thank you, Dick and Phyllis, for the use of your house. And they will know what that means. So finally, I want to thank 2 people who are not able to be here today. First is Patrice Vecchione, and Patrice is a beloved poet and teacher here in Santa Cruz in the Monterey Bay area, and she has a new book herself too. And I really want to put a plug for this. It's called My Shouting, Shattered, Whispering Voice. A guide to writing poetry and speaking your truth. So if you think you have a poem deep down inside, or that you are a poet, you really need to read this book. I keep this book on my desk at all times. And lastly, I want to thank Taylor Reinhold, an internationally known muralist who couldn't attend because he was doing a project in Dallas today. But Ted did the cover art for the book, and he did such a beautiful job. And there are so many times I've seen people pick up the book and they just never got past the cover. So if you get one of these books, even if you don't like the words, well, here it goes. You can frame this original work of art by Taylor Reinhold. So the title of my book is All Gone Awry, and it's the story of a Japanese-American art history professor who becomes a graffiti vandal. Happens right here in Santa Cruz. Now, graffiti has a long history. It goes back to antiquity, and with people carving their names in stone walls. And in the United States, people have noted gang graffiti all the way back to the time of the Revolution. By the early 20th century, crude graffiti appeared in all major cities across the United States. In doing the reading, I'm going to start off with the epigraph and go into the first two scenes. But the epigraph comes from a young Greek American who lived in the Washington Heights neighborhood of Manhattan. His name was Demetrios, but he was better known as Taki. And Taki lived on 128th Street. So Taki was not the first person who paired his name with his street number or his tag, but he was the first to take it out of the neighborhood and just go ahead and tag all over town. And in July 7th, 1971, he was discovered by a reporter at the New York Times. And many people believe that the resulting article led to the explosion of graffiti that just took over the city. And that all-city attitude, approach, spread to other cities in the eastern United States and then across the country to the point where we have this phenomenon happening all over the world. So I'm going to start off this reading by reading that epigraph and then going into the first scenes. You wrote it once and 100 people saw it. You wrote it twice and 1,000 people saw it. By your hand, you were known. Taki 183. Chapter 1. Santa Cruz, California, West Side, a house on Escalona Drive. Up in the loft, hours pass as the distant bay congeals into night. With back turned to the picture windows, Alex Awry draws his musings to a close. He shuts his laptop, stands at his desk, shutters the tableau with a sweep of a tall shoji screen. In the now hidden alcove, he leaves behind 3 subtle changes to a lecture he's given so many times before. Descending the stairs, he enters the hallway, heads for the master bedroom suite. After a shower, he dresses for sleep, props himself atop a worn blue comforter. A leftover warmth infuses him as he picks up the remote. Tapping in the news, he welcomes a glow from someplace on the opposite side of the world. Here on the California coast, it's a March night just past 12. What pours into the room are fractured images of a highly distressed ancestral Japan. For God's sakes, he reacts. I wonder if Lisa's watching. Lisa's up in Portland today, or is it Seattle? Quick connections. Japan, northeastern Japan, Fukushima, earthquake, tsunami, a 9 on the Richter scale, an American invention for measuring destructive potential. A Fukushima nuclear power plant fills the screen. No F sound in Japanese, just a whoo, like this whoosh, like the sound of a large lethal object flying overhead. Awestruck, Alex wonders how many people have already died. The reporter says maybe 500, but of course, the number will climb. The crestfallen Japanese ambassador to the US speaks under a hot, bright light. Alex detects the sheen of shame on the man's downcast face, half expects the man to apologize for the mishap. Maybe he should apologize for his country having created so much trouble for the rest of the world. The news anchor raises the death toll to 700, but says over 9,500 people are missing in Sendai alone. Through the electronic portal, Tokyo shudders and keeps shuddering. Over the time the tsunami strikes, a cumulative impact on the psyche. Every time the loop replays, more people have died. What an embarrassment for a country so sophisticated in quakes and tsunamis, a country so expert at predicting the magnitude of the future. Alex watches in horror as an explosion rocks a power plant. The electricity has failed, the diesel fuel backups knocked out. There's nothing left to calm the reactors. Will there be meltdowns? Japan relocates citizens outside a 10-kilometer radius, trying to spare them the fiery flash of sudden death, the cold time bomb of extended death. No one wants to become an atomic clock, measured out in his own lone half-lives. An oil refinery goes up in bulbous flame, an actual mushroom cloud portending nuclear doom. Godzilla soon to be reborn. Godzilla already alive. The reincarnation of Godzilla, the worst nightmare, the worst case memory for diminishing elderly few. Reaching for the phone, he calls Lisa. No answer, but of course, it's late. As for the TV, changing channels does nothing to alter the breaking story. He continues to watch, can't stop. Only commercial splices disturb the ongoing tale of destruction. It's only a matter of time where it happens here. The prophesied dropping of California into the Pacific. San Jose, Santa Cruz. Another example of synergy. The tsunami now heading for the Central Coast. After a turbulent night, Alex eases out of bed. Cursing the ache in his left calf, he calls his friend Carter. Hey, sorry about missing the last game. Should be fine in a couple days. Great news, Al. Got us a tough one this week. Although built more like a soccer player, Alex has always enjoyed Saturday night hoops with the guys. Given the ever-increasing wear and tear, maybe it's finally time to give it up. After all, he's a professor, an ivory tower type, pondering life at the cusp of 50. Sadly slowing over the years, he's made adjustments, plays smarter. Still, basketball belongs to much younger bodies, a game for kids who continue to have hops. After a few stretches, Alex drives off to Coffeetopia. Past the pink doorway, he joins the couple customers, settles to the croissant and his usual medium roast. At the communal table, he finds copies of The Guardian, The Mercury, and the local Courier, wades through coverage of last night's destruction in Japan. He wonders if any of his students will be stopping by to chat, something that happens from time to time. With a paper due on surrealism, some could definitely use his input. But no one wants to talk about Miro with Dali or Ernst with Magritte today. Instead, the lively little room buzzes with comments not only about events in Japan, but about those taking place all along this stretch of California coast. A grizzled white-haired man in worn leather jacket and olive cords. I went looking at it, the tsunami. The upper harbor got hit pretty bad. Around 11 this morning, must have been about 10 of them surges. A young male student in black ski cap, plaid flannel shirt, and beige shorts. Definitely I saw. It was on YouTube. The decks kind of exploded all in a row. Man, what would you do if you saw that thing coming after you? A young female student in orange tank top, denim cutoffs, and black leggings. And did you hear about some guy up north getting swept away? He was trying to take some pictures or something. Seriously, what was he thinking? A muscle-bound guy in gray sweatshirt, blue cargo pants, and skater shoes. Oh, fuck it, man. I tried to figure out why it sank. Maybe a door wasn't closed. Could only be there half an hour before the police shut it down. Alex wonders if the man swept away near Crescent City could possibly have been Japanese. Could the man be a part of that ethnic strain who, instead of duck and covering, grabbed their cameras and started clicking and recording? What kind of people are they? In the midst of certain death, they seem focused on the import, the significance of the moment, choose to memorialize an already indelible point in time. To capture the fleeting, the ephemeral, to record the great moment before toppling to the earth themselves. Here at the coffee shop, the quake and tsunami are the talk of the town. How many of these youngsters were even actually experienced the meaningful quake? How many were even alive in '89 for Loma Prieta, a geological event 100 times less powerful? Alex heads for home after absorbing the energy and excitement of the morning. He notes how so many people had responded by proceeding the wrong way, had flocked to the shoreline in response to the tsunami warning. They had wanted to view the local water surging through the narrow harbor. They had gone to view this once-in-a-lifetime occurrence. Nature in all her power, the threat of the apocalypse was just a slip of oceanic plates. And as for his own lost, unknown relatives, he wonders to himself about the eerie lack of bodies so far. Soon enough, they would be washing ashore. In the midst of unspeakable horror, the Japanese people seem not to speak. In shock, no doubt a strange, if not bizarre silence. Not exactly shikataganai, the Japanese concept of it can't be helped, but a stunning calm radiating from the faces of so many victims as Alex returns to the TV and the flat black screen of a circumscribed life. You know, I thought today, instead of going into the graffiti story, that I would want to introduce you to a few of the characters there by nature of their relationships, because you know, through this all, I mean, there's a lot of things going on in this book, but there are love stories also intertwined throughout. So two of those love stories are Alex and his longtime partner Lisa, who is an executive marketing expert at Xerox. The second relationship is Whitney B. Whitney B., who is a young student painter at UCSC, and whose boyfriend is Mario, a Cabrillo College student who is an intern, a journalism intern at a local paper. So this next scene takes place at Whitney's place. Whitney lives in a small unit on the top of a canary yellow house with a gray set of stairs going up the side. It's in downtown Santa Cruz. You probably locate and probably recognize units like that. And also she has a very interesting way of painting. Okay, here it goes. Whitney's place. Whitney ties her hair back, wearing an oldie and oversized tee. She gathers the loose hem into a knot. A fine gray light streams in from the morning window. About an hour has passed, an hour since Mario left her tiny loft. She can still hear his shoes padding down the outside stairs as she lay in bed. She contemplates opening the window, but enjoys the feel of last night's humid air, the nocturnal atmosphere that enveloped them both. But now he's gone. In a few hours he'll call her. We'll give her another one later in the evening. Approaching her easel, she selects her longest brush, and if forcing herself to maintain a distance, reaches out until it barely touches the painted face of Mario's chiseled face. It always ends up like this, to be alone, high up in a room made taller by her big imagination. Mari had to leave for work, leave for school, leave for whatever reason. It doesn't matter. That's what men eventually do. And over time, she's come to appreciate the fact that they leave, the fact that they vacate her private space. Go ahead and go, she would like to tell the men in her life. She doesn't need them only to the point where some brief satisfaction happens to overtake her.
She absorbs their residue, their scent hovering in the post-coital morning, a marine layer of spent lust dissipating well before noon. What she doesn't need is for a man to hang around, to be underfoot, to keep bumping into her for certain favors. She also hates the matter of long-distance hovering, the cell phone check-in, the constant self-accounting that keeps her electronically contained. Quick has grown an expert at providing men with plausible reasons to leave her. And all the while, she continues to vent her harshest emotions on canvas. The most recent example is a series of portraits of Mario, painted figures of the most gorgeous man she's ever had. After all the hours of steady refinement, it could not be any more real. Now the time comes for a definitive change. With the tip of her brush, she caresses the faultless face of her lover. She has it in her sights, dead to rights. She draws a bead, takes deadly aim at his eyes and pursue her, the mouth that's always eager to explore her. Now she empties a tube of bright yellow paint on her palette, dips the head of the brush into the thick, rich pigment. Standing alone, standing clear of an easel, she reaches once more for the flawless image. She scrubs the upper corner of the canvas with the yellow paint, turning into a cloud, a gathering turmoil, something of great threat. And then it rains, sulphurous rains that streaks across Mario's visage. The paint infiltrates his tousled hair, turns the strands and the color so at odds with his skin, and then the bristles descend, close each of his blue eyes with a drooping yellow lid. And then they pursue his lips, turning them in the color of something expelled from deep within, something curdled, something half digested. And the color comes from her, but she doesn't exactly know why. And as always, she doesn't bother to wonder. The twisted color pours from her, attacks Mario, defaces him. Coming to a finish, she backs her way to the countertop. She doesn't need a tool anymore to keep her at arm's length from the subject at hand. Who would want to get close to a man who looks like this? Whitney's managed to brush away his rugged beauty just as she quietly brushed him away this morning. Feeling tired, she sprawls back on her bed, wrapped in a shirt that hints of Mario's body. For the moment, that's all she needs. I have two more sections. This book is written third person, omniscient point of view. The only things that are different is when either Alex or Lisa are making an account of their own history of their relationship. For those sections, the scene is written in first person. So Lisa and Alex met in college, and over the years they were not always exactly together. So this scene takes place when Lisa has graduated with her business major at Stanford and is going to NYU to pursue her graduate studies and to get her MBA. So this is in Lisa's voice. I recall what an empty feeling it was at first. A huge roller coaster drop from when Alex left. I just got busy myself, threw myself into my new studies. But it was a lot to get used to. I mean, here I was in New York City and I felt all alone. The village itself was quite amazing. Over time, established some local favorites. The Bleecker Street Bakery, great for cannoli. A falafel place called Mamoon's. The deli on Bleecker and Barrow. Mostly I shopped at the Pioneers Market for groceries. In my kitchen, I kept two chairs beside the table. I'd make some tea, sit down on one. I could pretend Alex was sitting there in the other. Pathetic, actually. But I got to wonder, how long does it take to get over someone you care so much about? No answer, of course. And I eventually got tired of asking that stupid chair. After an initial period of paranoia, I started to open up to the new people around me. I made friends with a couple of women, fellow students, one from Western Pennsylvania, the other local.
They were both more outgoing than me, more fun-loving, I guess you could say. Rachel was born in Brooklyn and liked to stir things up. Sarah liked to tag along, and pretty soon I was tagging along soon, too. Rachel took us on walking tours of different Manhattan neighborhoods, was especially fond of the East Village. There was quite a nightlife going on there, lots of young people out on the streets, lots of artist types, filmmakers, theater folk, and musicians. Just the energy. I have to admit, I was afraid at first. There were hip-hop guys breakdancing in the corner, boom boxes going full blast, graffiti everywhere. I went to some bars and nightclubs for the first time in my life. Managed to check out the Roxy, Negro, the Peppermint Lounge. Because of my father, I never really drank before, but Rachel called me a sissy, and Sarah was giving me static too. So in keeping with this new chapter in my life, I started having a few drinks. Turns out I really liked vodka tonics, but limited myself to only 2 a night. And yeah, there was some serious dancing going on, lots of guys, really hot guys. But unlike my 2 friends, I never went home with any of them. I never accepted any of those slicky or sloppy invitations. That is, except for this one time. I think that night I managed to get an extra drink in there somewhere. The guy was really tall, had an open-collared shirt, tight jeans, and I was just all worked up, was really missing physical contact with a man. So we danced for a while, all crazy. Then we got close and danced slow, even though the music was going fast. We kissed each other on the dance floor. We actually started making out. It felt all floaty and good, and when we headed for the door, Rachel and Sarah both came over to stop us. Rachel yanked me away, must have told the guy to get lost. She'd seen him around before, knew something about him. It was that time, you know, in the early 80s, when crack cocaine had hit town. She said the guy was into drugs, was bad news. We talked about it later over mugs of coffee. We also talked about the strange new AIDS epidemic. Sarah laughed about it, which wasn't very nice, of course. She said she was just grateful to be young, single, and a heterosexual female. It might sound like I was pretty wild, but I wasn't. I knew I was putting a career together. I was on my way to becoming an expert at something. Maybe not exactly a professor, but an expert just the same. I was feeling better about myself. Sometimes at night, I realized I wasn't really missing Alex, and the pain of it all as it receded was replaced by a sense of freedom and excitement over possibilities. I began appreciating some of the young men in my program. I enjoyed talking to the guys who were into the material as much as I was, and a number of them started showing an interest in me, especially for my long legs and pretty hazel eyes. Over the 3 years I was in New York, I had 2 special relationships with men. They weren't the only ones I slept with, but they were the 2 I really cared about most. I think I needed some time to experiment around with sex. I wanted to know what it was like to be with other men. It's not like I slept around a lot. I was quite discriminating. I found out how different men were as lovers. Some were sensitive and liked to please, like Alex. A couple of them were so perfunctory, had so little awareness of what the experience was like for me. It's not like they were bad guys, they just didn't seem to get it. And then there were those guys who seemed completely wild about women, guys who were great in bed, but after the act, didn't really seem to like women that much. And apart from the sex, I wanted to know what it felt like for a man to fall in love with me. That happened twice, and they were the relationships I held on to longest. In both cases, I could honestly say I loved them back, and I developed some empathy for Alex. I mean, I cared a lot about each one, but didn't love them in the same way. It felt overwhelming at times, and worst of all, those 2 relationships overlapped. They knew about each other, and the pain I caused them was almost unbearable to me.
I even thought of writing Alex, getting his input on the
situation. But the most I revealed about other men was this one time I was feeling a bit expansive. I think I wrote something about having taken a lover. That seemed to trigger a flurry of letters from him. By the time I was in my last year of grad school, I'd say I'd pretty much gotten over Alex. That is, if you had asked me then. So getting back to that question, how long does it take to get over someone you care about so much, someone you actually love? I guess the answer for me would have been something like 2 years. As it turned out, I also learned that the issue of time had everything to do with timing. Because right after I started my last term, Alex called me on the phone one evening. It was funny in a way. I was just getting ready to spend the evening with my boyfriends. But it was quite a shock, hearing the voice of a man I had finally gotten myself free of. In fact, I was surprised, taken aback by how happy I was to hear from him. It was the first time Alex had ever called me in New York City, and he really needed to talk. Okay, I'm just gonna read one last thing, and this is in Alex's voice. It takes place later in the book. Alex, I remember we moved into a house a couple months before. A terrific house, better than anything we thought we could get. Not much furniture at first, couldn't afford it. It was practically empty for a long time. With its minimalist looks, Lisa and I could project whatever we wanted to into that space, project our entire future together. We talked about furnishings, exciting pieces we could purchase up in the city. We talked over color schemes and the nature of the surfaces. It was a large house, and somewhere along the line, I think we started populating it with potential kids. A backyard deck, room for a play set, certainly somewhere we could entertain our friends in the meantime. I know that particular day was just like any other for the two of us back then. Although it was fall, it was warm outside, an Indian summer kind of day. Lisa was home from work making dinner, boiling a chicken to be exact. I was finishing at the office, reviewing a paper written by one of my students. As I think about it now, the realization just kind of snuck up on me. The first thing I noticed was a hard shudder. Thought to myself, maybe it's an earthquake. Another shudder, probably an earthquake. One more, definitely an earthquake. By then I felt the whole room shaking. The cork board in front of me flew off the wall. A small watercolor crashed to the floor. I remember the sound of breaking glass. And then I jumped out of my chair, feared I'd be buried by the books behind me. Chunks of books broke off like pieces of glacier onto the floor. I got to the doorway and stood under the door jamb. It happened so fast, only my pounding heart told me that I was afraid. Everything got quiet. The earth was quiet, but then it wasn't quiet outside on the second floor walkway. Everyone was out, and someone was crying. High-pitched voices, people were following the high-pitched voices down the stairs. I was one of them, trotting through the courtyard, then out into the welcome expanse of grass. By then, students were exiting the dorms, multi-story structures that managed to stand their ground. I thought how great these buildings were, refusing to fall on people's precious children. And there was a lot of commotion, crowds of excited students like ants scurrying about, greeting each other. And the energy was impossible to contain. For all of us, I felt how completely vulnerable we were, our soft human bodies so fragile under the tall trees and looming concrete. So when did I think of Lisa? It was early on, I know. It was somewhere back in my office, somewhere back between the initial jolts and fleeing for the door. An image of her, just enough time for an image only. No words per se, but on the way to the grass, some huge feelings erupted, thoughts, words. Oh my God, how's Lisa? Is Lisa okay? A terrible sense of separation, already a feeling of loss. A desperate need to see her and to hold her close. The tangible Lisa, so unreachable. It was getting near dinner time, and I knew she was home. After several minutes, I dashed back through the courtyard, flew up the steps. I entered the mess that was my office. Picking up the phone, I dialed her number, but the lines were down. I thought, here I am on campus. Lisa was less than 2 miles away. And it felt like some great fracture had opened up in the middle of my life,
something beyond whatever fault line had ruptured that day. A huge yawning fissure, and there was nothing I could do to reach her. I'd gotten a ride to work that morning, an older faculty member prepping me for an early meeting, but I couldn't find him in all the chaos. I thought I'd better start walking, and that's exactly what I did. I started home on foot, down from the Hilltop campus, out the west entrance, along Empire Grade, Bay Street, Escalona. I walked fast, sometimes I ran. What will I find, I asked myself. Our house stands perched on the side of a steep hill. I had visions of everything having slid or tumbled down at the worst. Nearly 6 p.m. and it still felt hot outside. The air was thick and heavy, and I soaked through all my clothes. A few people lined the sidewalks. Actually, some were milling around in the middle of the street. People engaging each other, some agitated, some calm. I saw houses with shattered windows, warped walls. One last neighbor's house, and then there were ours. I ran all the way up the steep driveway, called out Lisa's name. Why isn't she out here on the street like everyone else? Bursting through the front door, everything seemed in place at first, but mostly because there wasn't very much to begin with. But when I got to the kitchen, I felt my feet crunching shards of glass. I saw cupboards flung open, spices everywhere, cookbooks, broken plates, cups, and I saw Lisa standing by the stove. I said something like, "Let's get out of here right now." Her face looked stunned. She mumbled something about the chicken she'd been boiling, glass in the chicken. I grabbed her hand and we scrambled down the driveway to the street. The rest of the evening, the citizens of Escalona banded together. Barbecues quickly opened and food was offered freely. Neighbors sat in lawn chairs, listened to transistor radios. As night approached, everyone talked about sleeping arrangements, where they felt safe to sleep. Lisa and I agreed we didn't want to return to home just yet, and looking up at the silent structure, it felt so far away. All the dreams, all the wonderful plans seemed unreal, so out of our grasp. I said to her, "Let's take the car and drive off. Let's drive off to someplace we know is safe." At the time, I had a different car, another Volvo, but it was silver gray. I made a joke of it, said we should check out the TV commercials, put the car's safety claims to the test. So we started climbing back up our driveway. Halfway up, another tremor. We just stood in place, hands interlocked, frozen. Eventually we made it inside, still terrified of aftershocks. Lisa and I threw toiletries and a change of clothes into one big suitcase. On the way out, we grabbed some bottled water, a loaf of bread, and some cold cuts. Electricity out, I opened the garage door manually. We got into the car and backed slowly down to the street. People waved as we drove off. Where to go, we asked ourselves. We'd heard the entire coast all the way up to San Francisco was hit. We'd heard that part of the Oakland Bay Bridge had collapsed, that fires were raging in parts of the city. We figured the quake must have been centered there. Little did we know the actual epicenter was only 9 miles away from us. Instinctively, I started driving to higher ground. What if it's true, I asked myself silently, that the coast of California could fall into the ocean with the big one? As it was, wherever I looked, I saw toppled chimneys and an occasional house knocked off its foundation. I told Lisa, "Let's go back to the university. Let's go back to the top of the hills." I drove us through the east entrance, took a left on Hager Drive, and at the east remote parking lot, I took a sharp right. Entering the empty grounds, I drove up to the southern edge. From there, we could see a gentle field and then the entire panorama of Santa Cruz. And beyond that, the bay. I felt we were atop the world, or at least atop California. Columns of smoke were rising from downtown, and beyond all that hazy water, the hovering peninsula. And above it all was the darkening blue October sky. The sound of helicopters was vaguely reassuring, and the first time I felt I could relax. Lisa was silent and touched me with her hand, said something like, thank you for knowing what to do." Reaching into the back, I pulled out the water and food. We spent the next half hour or so just taking in nourishment, watching the sunset, that simmering vista. And I felt so relieved, and I felt so good about being in that car with her. No big house, no pretensions to a grander life. It just felt right, the two of us sitting side by side, safe together, taking in this momentous event. And I'm sure I said it. I'm sure I said, Lisa, I love you. I'm sure I said it without her prompting me. I recall the feeling, a wonderful, close feeling as the clouds lit up in flame and the sky turned an ethereal orange. And I know she was feeling the same way too. And when it was finally dark, when the stars glowed like leftover embers from a sunset, we turned to each other. We hugged each other and we kissed. And we laughed because the gear shift kept coming between us. We laughed all the way down as we lowered our seats. When I squeezed over, it was so tight I had to get on top of her. And although we kept most of our clothes on, we made love on that special night. And time passed, and periodically we heard the sound was like the sound of a distant train. And each time after that sound, the earth shuddered again. And there was this kind of synchronicity, the earth shuddering, then our shuddering. And finally there came a point when we stopped trying to tell the difference. We're just going to open up for a little Q&A, and Don?
Yeah, could you say a little bit about your experience of art in preparation for the book? I believe I heard that perhaps you went to San Francisco and studied with some of the graffiti artists, and also something about your studies of art history.
Yeah, I was one of those kids who always drew when I was a kid. I drew all the time. And I loved art from the beginning. And then in college, I took two classes, the two best classes I ever took. And they were by a professor, Dr. Albert Elson. And they were about the history of modern Western painting and the history of modern Western sculpture. And he was also a world's expert on the French sculptor Auguste Rodin. So that gave me a strong foundation, I think. So in modern art. So in terms of postmodern art, I started studying that by reading after I was getting ready to retire. I think it's important to have all kinds of sources of information. You have what you grew up with, you have what you learn, and you also have what you experience. So yeah, I took not only a graffiti writing course up in San Francisco, but I took a figure drawing class right here in Santa Cruz. I made stickers on my own right, sort of like the ones I have over here, and I tagged buildings in 8 states, the District of Columbia, 3 continents. North America, South America, and Medellin, Colombia. We were in Japan, in Tokyo, and in the Shinjuku area, we were all together, and I found a little place called Piss Alley, and I got up there. Okay, so you really have to have that kind of relationship. Once in New York, just near the United Nations building, I found this construction fence, and I said, Carmen, take a picture of me. I'm gonna tag this thing. And so I tagged this thing, and Carmen took a couple of really nice pictures. And then we looked up, and we saw that a police camera looking down at us right at us. So you have to have the experiential knowledge, and so that's kind of how I put it together. I think, does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
yeah, thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah, Kathy.
So to follow up, how did you get your inspiration to write about graffiti artists for this book?
The origin story. Okay, what it was I completed another novel, and I was having a lot of problems with it. So I decided to stop and try something new. So as I was thinking about it, this first character came up to me, which was the Whitney character, the young student painter. And she has her quirks and stuff like that, but I needed a foil for her. I needed someone who could generate a lot of conflict with her, and that's when I came up with the Japanese-American art history professor. So one day I was coming into work and I saw that our external signage had all been tagged with graffiti. And so there it was. It was this dual reaction. Number one, I was so annoyed by the fact that we would have to get rid of this graffiti or get someone to do it for us. But then the other thing is I was struck by how beautiful it was. It was done in pink paint, and the embellishments were so graceful that it really was artful. So there you have it right away. You know, art is graffiti, art is vandalism. And again, somewhere along the line I thought to myself, well, what if I could get my art history professor to become a graffiti vandal? Yeah, like not only is he a tenured professor, but he's a Japanese-American man, for God's sake. You know, what does it take for a member of a so-called model minority to do a very public crime? You know, you have to be able to commit a crime in order to be fully acculturated. Anyway, so the challenge for me was to come up with a psychology to get you all to believe that he could do this. And so his story took precedence over everything else.
Did you have, in terms of your writing, kind of a blueprint for the arc of the narrative that you fleshed out, or did you find yourself being led by your own writing, if you will?
Yeah, I think in the industry you're called a plotter instead of a pantser. Plot everything as opposed to do it from the seat of your pants. I'm a plotter, but I leave just enough room that if something deviates from that, I'm open to it. So prior to writing this book, I made a complete synopsis of all the major plot points. And I followed a kind of an outline all the way through. Yeah.
In the excerpts you read, you talked about both the tsunami and Loma Prieta. What was the role of like natural disasters in your writing process, and what was the sort of artistic reason, and why are those significant? Were those significant events for you, artistically or historically? And what role do they have in the book?
Well, they're significant to me because Japan and the United States are separated by a huge ocean, but they're really connected by the Pacific Ring of Fire. So something happens in one place and it's going to affect the other. So I wanted to unite Japan and the United States because this is the ethnic struggle that the main character is going through. Plus, the opening scenes there, the triple disaster is really the heralding event. This is signaling to the reader that there's some big change that's going to happen in this guy's life. So one of the ongoing themes of this book is the fact that we are all subjected to sudden, drastic, sometimes terrible changes, and there's nothing we can do about it. So over time, that plays itself out. So yeah, it was very important.
Andy,
Yeah, George.
the characters in your book, are they totally derived from your imagination? Or are they inspired by people that you've encountered, either in your practice psychiatry or people that you've known? And if true, the latter, are any of those people in this room?
Well, George, one of them is you, there's all kinds of people here, but actually it's all fiction, and nobody, whether it's a friend or someone I worked with as a client,
will ever look at this and say, "Oh my gosh, that's me there," you know. But I have a sense as to what's possible in the realm of human behavior, and so I think I can tell when something is honest and true. So there are people like that who live in this world, but they're not somebody named Dean Cascino or something like that, you know. Yeah, really, it's fiction. It's just, yeah. Thank you. That was a good question. Okay, well, if there's anything else, let's see. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, one more question. I learned a lot about and was reminded about some of the Japanese American history that weaves through your book, and it's a nice telling that you do. And I was wondering how much that experience affected you growing up, you and your siblings, and if that was part of the story that you wanted to share in bringing this, in birthing this book.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have four younger siblings. I'm the oldest of five, and we really never talked about it. And when our parents talked about it, they always referred to it as camp. And so we thought that was like, we're nowhere near New York. It's like going upstate New York and having a good time or something. So we didn't really know about that very much until attorneys later, brought to the fore some of these important cases that show that the government was in the wrong. But the thing about it is that this has a lot to do with our narrative. All of us have a narrative. All of us have an ethnic narrative. It doesn't matter if you're white or brown or black or Native American. We all have a narrative. So when I read books, I really appreciate the stories about immigration, about the injustices during the warlike relocation, some of the heroic soldiers who fought. I mean, Franny Cascino's father was a hero in the 442nd. Dean Cascino's uncle was an icon in terms of his heroism. But reading all that kind of stuff, my question was, who the heck are we now? That took place 70 years ago, and people are mining that to determine who we are in terms of our narrative. And I really wanted to write a new type of protagonist, somebody who was just dealing with his own psychological issues and family issues. It just turned out that he would end up bumping head on into ethnic tropes in the end too. But I really wanted to move the narrative further. Really, who are to be seen as just the progeny of wartime victims and heroes is limiting. And so who are we now? Not that anybody cares, but I mean, who are we now?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Dino.
You mentioned that at the beginning that you had to decrease the book by 90 pages. How difficult was that? And is there anything in retrospect that you wish you would have left in?
Okay, when the book was 90 pages longer, I had to make a decision. What kind of book are you trying to write here? Are you trying to give people a lot of information, or are you trying to tell a story? And sometimes all that information got in the way of the flow of the story. So I took a whole lot of stuff out. But then, a year later, I realized I had taken too much out. So then I put some stuff back in to give it a little more intellectual, half there. So yeah, it was a back and forth kind of a thing, but I took away a lot of stuff that was just information. It's interesting to me, it could be interesting to you, but does it really help the story move along? Yeah.
And I understand that there's a lot of art history in this book, and I was wondering, do you think this could ever become a textbook for art?
Yeah. Well, you know what? It's not that good. But I think it could be made into a movie. So all of you with connections to directors and producers, talk to me afterwards.
Yeah, I think the last thing I want to say is that, you know, a good deal of this book was written in the backseat of my car. And the reason for this is because we have a border collie named Maybe who just likes to be with me all the time. So when I'm at home, I can't do it. So I sketch out a scene longhand, and then I go drive to a nice place, and then I go for a run, and then when I come back, I go to the backseat of the car, open up the laptop, and the scene kind of writes itself, you know. And of course, I have to take it back and let the dog look at it. But anyway, that's how that was written. If there's anything else, fine. Otherwise, I really thank you for participating in this, and we'll do a book signing. And is that good?
Invite people to please come and have something to eat and drink.
Oh yeah, we have some wonderful things out there. We'll open things up a little bit and just hang out for a little bit. So again, thank you so much. You guys all mean so much to us.